Hello and welcome to Digital Photography's i3 lecture series. We are thrilled to have Brad Smith as tonight's guest speaker. Originally from Florida, Brad graduated from the University of Florida with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. He is currently Director of Photography for Sports Illustrated magazine, where in the past he had worked as photo editor while also serving as Director of Photography for SI Kids and SI Women. From 1992 to 1995, he was the Assistant Director of Photography and Photo Editor for the White House during the Clinton administration. He also worked at Sigma Photo News and the National Audubon Association. In 2000, Brad joined the New York Times as Sports Photo Editor, a job he held for 12 years. He is on the faculty for Photo Fusion and the Rich Clarkson Sports Photo Workshop. He's also on the faculty for the Eddie Adams Workshop. Most recently, he was awarded first, second, and third place in sports story editing.
I think I was the only one that entered. I have a daughter that won a gardening contest that way, so I'm just...
Leave something for somebody else. In POY, Pictures of the Year, Brad has been on-site editor for 7 Olympics, 14 Super Bowls, and more NBA, NHL, and World Series games than he can count. So please help me welcome Brad Smith to our lecture series.
Thanks very much. Thank you for coming. I know it's not the best of evenings to be outside. I assume everybody here doesn't have cable TV. And that's why they would be here tonight. It's not a good night. But I appreciate that very much. I'm listening to all that stuff and I'm thinking to myself, who is that guy? Because I can't imagine how this all happened to me. But somehow it did. And a kid who'd never been to New York until he graduated from college, basically, and then just kind of moved there on a whim. It's really worked out well. And speaking of the State of the Union, I have to take a second to tell you that by a great coincidence and an honor for me, one of my former bosses and the personal photographer for President Clinton, Bob McNeely, is here tonight. He photographed the president's 2 administrations and also for Mondale during that administration, right?
That's the side we're
Yeah.
for.
Yeah. He's a lot of State of the Union. Bob, yeah, Bob happily took this job over coming here tonight over another State of the Union. So thanks for coming, Bob. Anyway, it's nice to be here. I appreciate being invited. I really do. It is a busy week for all of us at Sports Illustrated. 3 of our editors are in the back there who work at Sports Illustrated, and they've had a ridiculously long day and were nice enough to stop by tonight, and I appreciate that. I think I woke up about 4:30 this morning and caught a bus about 5:45 into the city and then took a shuttle over to Newark to go to Media Day for the Super Bowl, and then hustled back to the office for a few hours and then came here. And during the course of the week for the Super Bowl, as we lead up to it, Linda Bonifant, who's in the back there, one of our photo editors, coordinates the majority of the logistics leading up to the Super Bowl, which is a nightmare all into itself. Sports Illustrated will send 9 photographers to the game and pick up art on a couple of more. We have 6 on the field and 3 upstairs, and that's part of my job, is to work with the photo editor who does the pro football, and to sit with him and other people and go over where the photographers will be and which ones do best in every area. Some people shoot best overhead. It's a little bit a different way to look at the game, and they're really good at that. And then some of them are really good on the field itself. And we have those. So anyway, we are fortunate at Sports Illustrated to have the resources and the reputation and great editors like the 3 back there who attract the best talent in the world. So we're really lucky that we get to choose the best photographers. So it makes us look good every day because we all get to work with the best shooters around. I'm going to play something really quickly, which is from the London Olympics, which kind of gives you an idea of the type of thing that Sports Illustrated does really well. The former managing editor of the New York Times used to call it flooding the zone, which is just sending all your resources and your best talent into one area for a big story. And photographically, Sports Illustrated still does that at events, big events, like the one that Marguerite Schropp in the back is coordinating soon with the NCAA basketball tournament and the men's basketball NBA finals and so forth. And that takes a lot of logistics. She has numerous locations, photographers around the country. And the Olympics is no different. We have, I think, 10 photographers were at this Olympics. And I'll show you a little bit of what they did. All right, so that just gives you an example of what we do for really big events. And I just have to tell you that I can't imagine anybody luckier than I am. I love my job so much. I wake up, I can't get to work every day. Since I came back to Sports Illustrated for the third time, this job now, which has been almost a year, I still feel like I won a contest because all I get to do is go to work and oversee a department that has the most amazing editors and photographers and a creative director who's wonderful to work with, and every day I get to do this over and over and over. And if you really love your job, then obviously you're incredibly fortunate, and I feel that way. And also I'm just kind of wired that way. I loved my job when I worked for Bob at the White House. That wasn't a bad gig either. But I have gravitated towards places that I've enjoyed working. I've never worked anywhere that I just didn't really enjoy it a great deal. And this is no exception. This particular Olympics, I think the number is 10 photographers, give or take, it's about that amount. And Marguerite probably looked at a quarter of all those photos by herself, and Christina's looked at them, and Linda and everyone else, and they ingested cards totaling about 400,000 images, a little over 400,000 over the course of that Olympics, which is a lot of art to go through, obviously. And Sports Illustrated, in its current form, is a 24-hour news service that happens to cover sports. We have a magazine, which is the anchor for the entire franchise. We have tablets, we have apps when we have them, we have a website, and any other number of formats that we can figure out where to place them in the various platforms. And it requires a lot of art, and not all of it is the same as it moves forward from one platform to another. So we're able to look at these images every day, and even though it's kind of covering the same thing over and over, sports, it doesn't change much from one NBA final to another. There's still innovations with our photographers and editors like Marguerite again in the back, who works with one of the best basketball photographers in the world, who's on staff, John McDonough, and another gentleman who works with us, Greg Nelson. These are two of the best basketball shooters in the world. And she gets to work with them, and her job is to make sure it doesn't look like last year's, because people will remember that it looked the same. So she moves them around, they try different things, and that's part of what we do. One of the things I've always thought of sports photographers, and I'm sitting here looking out here, and just by sheer good fortune, as Bob is also here, the Yankees team photographer is here, Goldman is here, and Ari spends the whole year figuring out how to document the Yankees over the course of the year. Whether they win or lose, her job is to document the Yankees. And it's not an easy job, and it's certainly, I know the tradition of sports photography, it's not easy for a woman to be there where there's like 19 knuckleheads from every newspaper in New York City covering these games over and over, and it's a lot of work, and you have to figure out a way to make it look different, and you have to work hard, and the team is doing well, you want to show that. Team's struggling, you kind of have to show that if you work for the team, but it's still your job. There's a game on Sunday. It's Super Bowl, right? It's called. And there's two teams, of course, playing. And Rod Marr is sitting in the front row. He's the team photographer for the Seattle Seahawks. So his job is to cover the Seahawks throughout the season, as he'll be doing on Sunday for them. Good luck, Rod. Go Percy Harvin. Go Gators. Rod has the same kind of dilemma that the Yankees have, which is, you're covering a team, and in a way, the same way Bob did when he's covering the president. His job is not to make the president look like an idiot or look bad in any way. It's to document him honestly, but at the same time, you have that balance. And when you're with the team photographers, I think that what connects these three people into that same group as John and Greg, the photographers I spoke of earlier, what connects them is they are incredibly competitive, and they look at the event for that day when they go out. It's to some degree a competition, whether it's against the other photographers who work with you or standing next to you from the wires, or whether it's just in your own head and you made something up. You have to be competitive to do it. I've always found the best sports photographers have an innate competitiveness to them, and that drives them forward because what they're covering is incredibly competitive, and that's our job at Sports Illustrated. In a nutshell, my job is to oversee a department that collects visual evidence of the world that we live in. And by the world, I'm talking about sports. That's the world I live in. It's sports, 24 hours a day. And I never get tired of it, but that's what we have to cover. And the photographers we use are not only talented, but they are innovative. They come up with new ideas. They hang remotes, if you're familiar with that. They hang a camera up here that's run by a wire somewhere else or whatever apparatus they want to use to trigger it because it's hanging above the backboard or it's hanging up in the stands or it's in the net at a hockey game or something like that. Their job is to keep coming up with new and better ways to kind of show those photographs. And then our job is to kind of navigate with them and choose them and sit with editors and pick those photos on a daily basis. It's a fun job. It's a high-pressure job because every week we have to come out with a magazine. 50 issues a year we come out. Twice we have a double. So it's a lot of work for all of us, and we all have to work together. The United States this year is sending 235 athletes to the Winter Olympics, the largest contingent in Winter Olympic history. And in a much smaller level, we send a team to the Olympics, about 10% of that. But we send our own team to the Olympics, and we compete with each other, and that's how I decide that this guy goes instead of this guy, because you want to send the best people, and it's the same thing. The best editors and the best photographers and the best writers and everybody, they're working at the top of their game to go to these events, and I'm very fortunate that we get to cover those kind of events that way. So the first one is literally was random photos, which are obviously from the Olympics. And then we just shoot every event that is dictated primarily by the news. It's dictated by a couple of variables, but primarily the news of what our writers. If our writers are writing about it, we want to send a photographer to cover it. It's the same kind of thing. And that happens when we go to an event like that or the World Series or anything else. What I'm going to show you here are some stories that we've done for the magazine, not just so much action-driven, and also some ideas that we had a little feature-wise, and then a lot of photos in here of behind the scenes, things that people don't normally get to see, of what the photographers have to go through in order to get the photo and so forth. Sports Illustrated was started in 1954. And in 1954, Henry Luce, the founder of Time Inc. and Time Magazine, came up with this idea, let's have a sports magazine. I think pretty much universally everyone thought it was a bad idea because they thought, who reads sports magazines? A bunch of lunkheads, sitting around playing sports, lifting weights, doing whatever. They're pretty sure they couldn't even read, much want to have to go through a sports magazine. So it was a bad idea throughout the company. But they put it out anyway. And 60 years later, which is where we are now, it is thriving and doing well in a publishing world that isn't doing so well. We were up slightly last year when if you broke even on your circulation, it considered a victory. So we're doing well. It's the 50th anniversary this year by coincidence of the swimsuit issue, which is our most famous and lucrative issue. And the magazine itself, it's the 60th anniversary. So that was the very first cover. This was just a few weeks after I started the Boston Marathon runs. In Boston, the same day the Red Sox play, it's called Patriots Day, et cetera, et cetera. And as everyone is aware at this point, almost a year later, at 2:50 in the afternoon on this particular day, a bomb goes off. A few minutes later, another bomb goes off. And we're sitting in the offices. We were in an edit meeting, and I saw on my phone a text that there was a bombing occurred in Boston at the marathon. I didn't think a lot of it at the time because who knows where it was in Boston. I've covered news enough to know not to get too riled up until you have a little more information. So I'm sitting there, and then a second one hits, and I walk down the hall, and we start talking about it, start going through the wires. This photo moves pretty quickly. It's by the photographer who works for the Boston Globe. This is part of how we work and how anyone would work. We're not at this event. We're not at this event because it's the Boston Marathon, and they run it every year, and it doesn't really mean much to me day to day. This year, I guarantee you we'll be at the Boston Marathon to see what happens a year later. Last year, we weren't. Like most years, we probably are not. The photographers that are there work for wire services. They work for local newspapers, maybe a couple of running magazines, that type of thing. So then an event like this happens, and an event this big suddenly becomes this big. And all of their photos then go out over the wires for the entire world to kind of call and go through and look at their images. And that's what we do on this particular day at an event we weren't at. This photo came across relatively quickly by the Boston Globe as the AP moved it across the wires. And when I saw this photo, I walked down the hall and I went to our creative director's office and I said, here we go. I think, to me, this was the cover immediately. I don't know how it wasn't the cover. And you're very lucky when you can find the cover first, because in the world of publishing, there's only one image that really, really matters, and that's the cover. That's by far the most important cover. Most important image. So we take the image, we put it on the cover, and we take these 3 policemen, all of which you can see everything in this photo. It's everything that makes a news photo a great photo. You have some idea of what's going on. There's information here. There's clearly some degree of panic among the 3 policemen, each reacting in their own kind of some degree heroic way. You have an athlete, so that places it in a category of sports. And we've got an athlete on the ground. This elderly gentleman had run the marathon, just crossed the finish line, and they are heading out in various directions to see what's going on here. So you can tell everything you need to know about this. It's why you don't need 12 different subheads and titles and so forth to explain what's going on. The image does it all right here. You don't need a lot of words for it. So this was a great cover for us to get pretty quickly in what was clearly a tragic day. This closed on a Monday. Normally our magazine closes roughly 7 o'clock at night, right, give or take. This happens at 2:50 in the afternoon. For a weekly magazine, that's like, this isn't what they do day to day. It's not how they react to stuff, because most sports events are planned. They're Thursday at 8 o'clock at the Garden. It's pretty simple. This just happened out of nowhere, and we reacted to it, and then in the course of those hours, we wrote an article, and we ran a cover, and we were able to move it forward. The next day on Tuesday, I came into the office. I spoke to our managing editor, Chris Stone, and I walked down there, and I said, it seems to have gone pretty well, all things considered. He goes, yeah, and he looked at me and said, that must be what it's like to work at a newspaper. And I said, yeah, that's exactly what it's like to work at a newspaper every single day. Even if people don't die, that's what a newspaper does, exactly that. At 2:50 something happens. At 2:50 in the afternoon, you have all these ideas on what you're going to do. At 7 o'clock, you go to the Yankees game. And at 7:30, Derek Jeter hurts his ankle. Our whole newspaper changes. The structure of the whole paper has to change in a matter of hours. Because in New York, that's a big deal. So you have to react to it. And that's the same way with that. This is a photographer who shoots for us out of Texas named Robert Seal. And Robert Seal was commissioned by us to photograph these 3 guys who play for the San Antonio Spurs, which is a pro basketball team, if you don't know. And he's going to take these guys who are like, Tim Duncan is what, 7 foot 2 inches tall or whatever, or over 7 feet tall. And the other 2 are tall too, but one of them's 7 feet tall. And the Spurs give us a room that is maybe from here to the wall and about that wide, which is fine if you're shooting, I don't know, a dog or somebody who's under 4 feet tall, you'd be fine. But to shoot a 7-foot man and 2 other large men next to him, it doesn't work. You can't get back far enough to make the scale work. So the photographer gets there and he realizes this is a disaster because we want to shoot this on the cover. And we want to shoot this photo for the cover. The Spurs have agreed to do this photo. We've agreed to try to put it on the cover. So there's a lot riding on it. And it's not going to work in this closet of a room they've given us. One of the things that comes with being a professional photographer, which all 3 of the photographers I mentioned will tell you, is you have to be a problem solver. Nothing ever goes the way you plan it to go. If I call you and give you a job, I can guarantee you I've got 5 things wrong. They actually live with their sister, not their husband. They have a dog, not a cat. She actually has a car, not a motorcycle. It's always wrong. In the translation, something is wrong. And it's not really relevant whether they have a dog or a cat. What's relevant is that the photographer goes in and makes the best out of what you've given them. They figure it out because problem solving is part of what it is. Rod's assignment for the team is to photograph the quarterback of the Russell Wilson one day for the team, and Russell's supposed to show up at 3, and Pete Carroll wants him to photograph the coach at 4. Russell Wilson shows up at 3:50. Now what's he supposed to do? He has to figure all these things happen very easily. They happen in politics, they happen in sports, they happen everywhere. And photographers, the best photographers who get hired for editorial jobs are problem solvers. They're also really good at what they do, but they have to be problem solvers. They can't panic. They can't make 42 phone calls. They can't go home, which I'm sure is probably what they would like to do. So Robert Seal decides, I'm going to do it out in this parking garage. The door to the facility is right over there on the right. You can see these athletes have to walk about 130 feet, which for a professional athlete is like 7 miles, because the last thing they want to do is walk across a parking lot to somewhere they don't really have to go. And they don't even want to be at this photo shoot in general, I can tell you. But the fact that they have to walk, it's not a good thing. So they bring him out. Robert says, I found an empty parking garage, high ceiling. I'm going to set up the photo there. Robert then has enough sense to realize one of the guys who's notoriously not very heavy on personality, we'll just say. So it's hard to get this particular basketball player to emote much of anything, to look like he's happy or sad or whatever. So we're lucky. 2 of his kids are there. And Robert says, oh, this is great. I'll set this up, and then I'll put the kids on my back. So this is the son and daughter for Tim Duncan, who's the star basketball player for this team for like 15 years. A great player, he's a Hall of Fame player, but he's notoriously doesn't give a lot. There's not a lot of there as far as being personable in that way. Great basketball player, but he's not going to smile and laugh and goof off. So Robert thinks he's finally got it, and sure enough, here's Tim Duncan smiling in the middle there. That's what he looks like when he's really happy and his kids are having a good time. That's what he looks like. You can see the difference, right? So that's the cover we came up with. And you can see how tall these guys are. You can't put them in a room like this and shoot what is essentially like a 3/4 length profile.
And they're shot together? Not
They were all shot together, right. In that particular one. These are some covers we've done. I'll just run through these real quick. Al Teelmans is one of our staff photographers out of Philadelphia and one of Rod's counterparts out on the field very often. He's a really great football photographer, and because he lives in Philadelphia, he's been in the snow before. So this particular weekend, there was 3 or 4 games around the country, all kind of in the Midwest and the Northeast, covered in snow, feet of snow. Not like a little, flurry, but like feet of snow. Professional football fields are multi-million-dollar projects all by themselves. They never hold water for 2 seconds because they have a drainage system that is so complicated and sophisticated. Any moisture hits it, it's gone in seconds. Doesn't lay there and have puddles. It's not Division III football where the guys are muddy and all this stuff. Never happens in pro football anymore. So they have to get this stuff off the field quickly. It absorbs, it goes. It is snowing so heavy they can't do it this weekend, which happens like once every 5 years. Rarely does it happen. It has to be a lot of snow, has to be snowing during the game, has to be a perfect storm of situation. In this particular case, Al is out there. Now the problem is obvious to all of us what the issue is here. It's your equipment. You have electronic equipment out in the snow. You're trying to focus on, you can't see that wall. You can't see 10 feet in front of you. And Al is there for us. Elsa is there for Getty, and they're talking to each other. They're trying to find some point on the field that they can focus on, maybe 20 feet out. And then you hope the play runs in front of you because you can't follow focus because it's too difficult in this amount of snow. In this particular game, it just snowed heavier and heavier as the game went on. So when we show these photos, it's to us, it's more than just like another football. You take the snow out of this picture, and it's a good football picture. You add the snow, and it's like a once every 10-year football picture, especially in pro football. So we get a cover out of that. This is Jason Collins, who we did a story in May of this past year where he came out and said that he was a professional athlete who was gay. He was the first one who had still had some degree of relationship with a professional team, baseball, basketball, football, hockey, American teams, and still somewhat actively playing. So at the time he's with team and he is announcing that he's gay, which was a big deal in our society. And some people have done it after they retired, maybe other countries, not Sochi, of course, they have none, no gay. But in other places around the world, this is a big deal. And it was a big deal for us. It's a big deal for us because, as it says above the gay athlete, it's exclusive. That's every magazine's dream, is to have the word exclusive, even if it's not true. Sometimes they put it up there anyway. But this was for us. He came to us. He wanted to present his story. He tells us his story. He invites a photographer over to his house. We spend some time with him. We photograph him. I have to then call this photographer, and this is something else that occasionally happens, not very often, but I call the photographer out in Los Angeles. Kwaku Alston is his name. He's a portrait shooter out of LA. Great photographer. And I call him up and I said, I need you to photograph this guy tomorrow in the Bel Air area of LA. which if you know LA, it's like some ritzy area of LA, nice houses, whatever. Okay, what am I doing? Just go to his house and shoot a portrait, maybe follow him around the house a little bit, choose a picture. What's the story? Yeah, I can't really tell you. And he goes, well, a little background on the guy? Yeah, I can't really tell you. What's his name? Yeah, I can't really tell you. I couldn't tell him anything. I get a call while I'm playing softball out in Central Park on this particular Wednesday, and this photograph was taken on a Thursday. And the executive, John Wertheim, calls me up and says, I want you to do this, 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 but you can't tell anybody this, this, or this. So he tells me, but I'm not allowed to tell him. So I got to call the guy who has to go to a guy's house that he hasn't met, doesn't know what he looks like, doesn't know his name, has no idea what to expect, and he's supposed to come home with great photographs. How do you prepare for that? You know, you don't. You bring everything you have, every bit of equipment that you own, you put it into 2 vans, you drive to this guy's house, and then you set up and you realize, oh, I have to photograph a 7-foot-tall African-American man. And it's different. The size of a person makes it different. The skin tone makes it different. All these things are something that if you know ahead of time, you prepare for it. And if you don't know ahead of time, you bring everything. So we do this story here. It gets a lot of coverage, mostly because of the subject matter, more than the photos, to be honest. But it was still historical for us. And he came to us first to do the story, so this was a good one for us. This is a story on a high school coach. Well, I think he's a guidance counselor, actually, rather than a coach, in Ohio. And in what seems to be an endless number of school shootings in America, this gentleman was there and figured out who the shooter was and chased him down the hall and cornered him in a room. And at the end of the day, a very unassuming, quiet, nice man who didn't want any part of this puts his life to some degree on the line and saves what most certainly would have been additional deaths in what was already a massacre to some degree of a couple of people had been killed. And it would have been worse if it hadn't been for this guy. So we go to do this story, and another one of our staff photographers, Simon Broody, is sent out to Ohio to do it. And you're trying to figure out, how do we photograph this guy? How do we show that? I mean, he's heroic, but he's quiet. And among other ways you could describe this man, one of the things you have to say is he's a rock, just a really solid guy that everybody could gravitate towards, especially when you're in high school where you're all over the map every way anyway. You're looking for one solid thing in your life, and maybe it's this guidance counselor. So we put him in the hallway. We do the old trick, which is by no means unique to us, but we slow the shutter speed down a little bit, as you know, and you have all the chaos. The anonymity of the students is the whole point, and the chaos, and then he just stands still for a few seconds and poses in the middle, and we get this nice portrait of this gentleman who went through a really difficult time. This is Kate Upton, who is one of our swimsuit models, with the Upton brothers who play for the Atlanta Braves. This has nothing to do with anything other than this is Kate Upton, one of our swimsuit models. And whenever we can use Kate Upton for a magazine, it's not the worst thing in the world. Because part of our job is to sell a magazine. That's the reality of what we do. And once in a while, we throw something in here where somebody has the bright idea to photograph Kate Upton with the Upton brothers, not related, but at the same time, they have the same name. Sure, it makes perfect sense in an editorial meeting one day to throw them all together and see what happens. So we essentially rent out Citi Field, where the Mets play. They're away. We borrow the field. We do this at the field, although you can never see Citi Field anywhere in these photos. It could have been done in this room, but nonetheless, that's where we shot it. And it's part of our franchise, the swimsuit issue, and it's, on occasion, it filtrates itself into other areas besides the swimsuit issue itself. This is a case where we decide to do a story on Alex Rodriguez. And we're going to do a story. He is one of the greatest baseball players of all time. He's also, at this point in his career, one of the most disgraced. He's just, you know, as talented as he is and wonderful as he was as a player, and now is lots of controversy, to say the least. And we decided to do a story on him. Well, let's just take for granted he's not going to pose for us. So I can't call him and say, can you come sit for a picture for us? No. He's not actively playing. At this point, he's in the minor leagues, which somewhere in New Jersey, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, but one of the teams in New Jersey. And we're looking at photos that, again, they've come across the wires. And out of nowhere, we run across this photo, which is just, it's perfect for us because he's not in his Yankees uniform, which in a way is actually better for us because it's not about the Yankees. It's about Alex Rodriguez and his problems and trying to get back to the major leagues. And we find a photo on the wires that perfectly illustrates it. So sometimes you get lucky and you get a portrait that works great, and sometimes you do something like this. This is one of our photo shoots. Now, these are some behind-the-scene photos that you wouldn't normally, obviously, not only would you not see, you'd have no use for them whatsoever anyway, but except for tonight. So sitting down in the bottom right is Walter Yos, who's one of our staff photographers, and has been for many decades, I guess, off and on. Walter is one of 4 people. And Rod, how many Super Bowls is this for you?
6.
This is Rod's 6th Super Bowl. This will be Walter's 48th Super Bowl. He is one of 4 photographers left. There's 2 writers that have covered every Super Bowl, and there's 4 photographers that have covered every Super Bowl. And Walter is one of them. Walter is a great sports shooter. He shoots advertising and commercial work. He does some modeling stuff with regards to the swimsuit. He always shoots at least one story in the swimsuit issue. He's also one of those people that has developed relationships with certain athletes over the years. And smartly for him, it's not a guy who never plays, it's the star of the team. So he has a really good relationship for years with Michael Jordan. Did a couple of books with Michael, rode that horse all the way home. Here he is with Mariano Rivera, right? The greatest closer in the history of baseball, a great Yankee. This was his this past year he retired. And so we decide we're going to do this story, and you were there that day, remember? And so we decide we're going to do this story. I'm going to tell really quickly. This part down here is a piece of black felt that is, you can see the grass over here? That's what that looks like there if it didn't have black felt on top of it. So we've been to the stadium ahead of time a week or 2 before, and we figured out this is where we wanted to put him. So we cut a piece of plywood, really thick plywood, and we cut it to shape to fit that spot there. And then we cover it with the black velvet because it's incredibly forgiving. So then they come down, and the head of the media office for the Yankees comes down with Mariano. They come down the stairs. We're all waiting. There's like 4 of us down there. And what do you want him to do? And we say, well, what we want your $25 million a year baseball player to do is stand on top of this piece of plywood with a drop down at the bottom on the other side of the steps covered in black velvet. The media guy looks at me and says, he's not doing that. So what else do you want to do? And then I look at Walter and I think, we have no plan B. We don't have any idea what we're going to do because this was it. This was our idea. So you're kind of sitting there and kind of wondering what we're going to do. You can't really argue these kind of points. If the guy doesn't want to do it, he doesn't want to do it. The good thing was this guy didn't say he didn't want to do it. It was the PR guy, and rightfully so. He's trying to protect his investment. He doesn't want the guy to fall. That makes sense. Mariano says, I won't fall. It's okay. And so that came because he has a relationship with Walter, and he trusts Walter, which is important when you have this relationship with the subjects, and that's every photographer can take that. One of the things you develop as you meet somebody, whether it's a career or for 10 minutes, this is what's going to make a great picture, is you're going to have a connection with the person. And that connection is going to create the good picture. And then later on in life, that connection creates trust, where Mariano trusts Walter. You want me to stand up there? I'll stand up there. And he does. So that photo becomes this photo with the whole field, the great Yankee Stadium. It's one of the most iconic, maybe the most iconic sports venue in the entire world. And here he is up here. It's taken little hours before the game, like batting practice, I don't even think was really going on. That turns into this, which is the cover. Now, I personally love the big opener and 2 pages. I kind of picture this more as like an opener to run 2 pages, and you put some text over here and you got this big thing, but we cropped into it to make it the cover. It worked just as well. You can see our black velvet there and everything, so it worked out really well. And Walter's relationship is the key to these things. The other key I just want to point out is that he cut plywood and he brought black velvet. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. He went, scouted it, low profile, very quietly, just went over on his own, looked around for a couple hours. This is where I want to put him. Light's going to be here, sun's going to be over there, nobody's going to be on the field at this time of day. Had it all kind of figured out ahead of time, and that's the key, is planning. While it's nice to be spontaneous and kind of trust your instincts, really as a photographer, you really have to have some degree of planning involved to make stuff work, and you have to really kind of talk about it ahead of time, which he did. Dennis Rodman was on our cover many, many years ago in 1995, and the writer, Michael Silver, and the photographer, John McDonough, with the Marguerite's typical photographer. They follow Dennis Rodman to Las Vegas. I don't know if anybody knows Dennis Rodman or knows who he is, but you can just imagine a 24-hour trip to Las Vegas with Dennis Rodman. You don't ask him to put this stuff on. This is what he's wearing. This is him. This isn't like a stylist came in and said, let's do all this. This is what he does. So they take this photograph. You can also see it's dated by the block glass, which I think was a leftover from a Miami Vice scene. And then they, you place him here, he takes the bird and says, okay, it's a very memorable cover for us because we take kind of this somewhat controversial guy. He's out there a little bit. And we pose him here and we put him in hot pants. Not a lot of hot pants on our magazine, men or women. We just don't do hot pants really well. So we pose him here. It becomes a very big cover. Fast forward to this past summer. We do an issue in the summer. It's a double issue called Where Are They Now? We take various athletes and so forth, and we try to figure out where they are today versus where they were 20 years ago, 10 years, 15 years ago, whatever. Dennis Rodman is one of the guys we decide to catch up to. So we decide we're going to take Dennis Rodman to a studio, kind of in this area, I guess, on the other side of Chelsea, a little bit west. And instead of a parrot, we're going to use a falcon. And instead of a suit, in the leather hot pants and stuff, maybe he'll wear a suit and he'll kind of go counter, as in he's grown up a little bit. Turns out he really hasn't grown up very much. So he didn't go for the suit part, but he did go for the bird part. The interesting thing about the bird, and I trust this will stay in this room, the bird was paid more than the photographer. It cost me more to rent this bird than it did to pay the photographer that took that picture. The photographer who took this picture is an instructor here, Clay Patrick McBride. I don't know if anybody knows him or works with him, but whatever, he took this photo here. And I'm talking to Clay ahead of time. I said, turns out they bring 2 birds. I don't know why, but they do 2 birds. I'm assuming just to charge me for 2 birds because that makes sense. It makes good business sense. So they're in the studio. They're hanging out. The bird's like on the guy's arm in the big leather thing. All of a sudden, the bird takes off across the room, flies across, right into the window, smack, falls down to the ground, does this with its little head like a cartoon. Guy takes it, puts it into the cage, brings out bird number 2, and we start all over again. And that's why they bring 2 birds, because they're stupid. And you have to protect yourself against the really dumb one, and you get the better bird. So then the better bird goes with Dennis Rodman, and you get this picture. And if you can see, the darker bird here is the one who hit its head. This is the lighter color bird who didn't hit its head, who ends up being on the cover, see? So if you don't run into a window, you could be on the cover. This is a shoot in Miami Beach this past summer. As a soccer player, I don't know if anybody follows soccer or cares about soccer, but if you do, there's a wonderfully talented, little bit crazy, incredibly talented soccer player named Mario Balotelli. Plays for AC Milan. And he's one of the greatest players in the world, talent-wise. He's still got some maturity issues, but he's getting there. So I have a meeting one day with the soccer writer and myself and these executives for AC Milan at a hotel in Manhattan. And I go and I say, this is what I'd like to do. I pitch my idea for a photo. I mean, we've already got the interview all set. He's agreed to be photographed in Miami a couple of weeks later as the team makes this swing to the United States. And I say, I want to put him in a swimming pool. And I said, and what I want to do is basically have him standing on water. And the fact that he plays in Italy, which is highly Catholic, wasn't my only reason to have him stand like this, standing on water, but it didn't hurt. So I'm explaining this to them, the interpreter's telling them, we're going back and forth, and they're like, oh, yeah, and they think it's a good idea, but then they say, no, we just want to pose him in his jersey. And I said, yeah, here's the thing about that. Anybody could pose him in his jersey, and nobody will remember it 2 weeks from now. I said, but standing on water like this, they're going to remember it for a while. So I call the photographer, Jeffrey Salter, down in Miami, and I say, this is what I'd like to do. You want to work with me on this? He goes, yeah, I'd love to. In Miami, they do this stuff often enough that it's not so hard to find somebody who builds a plexiglass table for you. They build the plexiglass table, then you can see it takes X number of people. Those are sandbags down on the bottom here. They're going to go on the bottom of the table to weight it down. The thing about a swimming pool is it's not flat on the bottom. It slopes because there's a shallow end and a deep end. And it doesn't go like this. It goes like this. So if the table's like this, then the table's like this. And you take a soccer who makes millions of dollars a year and you want to put him on the table, it better be level. So you have to put sandbags underneath. It takes hours to set this thing up. Finally shows up. He's all ready, and he's going to stand on this thing. He comes out near the pool, near the restroom or the changing room by the pool. And I tell him my idea for the story, and he goes, okay, but I don't want to get wet. And I said, no problem. He goes, no, I don't want to get wet. And I said, okay. So now I'm like thinking, I'm a little nervous because we're going to take him and put him on this pool that's sloping down like this, and the sandbags might shift. So I got to get it all ready. So then I think to myself, okay, the photographer is here. This is Jeffrey Salter, obviously on the ladder there. I'm thinking now the least of my worries is a soccer player falling in the water. My biggest issue is an electronic light plugged in who's sitting in a swimming pool. And I'm thinking, what if a gust of wind comes by and that light falls over into the water? How would that affect Mario Balotelli's career? So I'm thinking that, but I'm thinking wet. That's not your problem. Your problem is that this light falls into the water. The photographer's sitting on the ladder, and every time he takes a picture, the ladder's kind of shaking a little bit. So I said, you got to get off that ladder. Move back, stand on the edge, and just lean in a little bit, and you'll make up the distance. So we put him on the table here, plexiglass. You can see where it is here. You can see the guy who has to sit underwater and kind of hold it to keep it steady. My favorite part of the whole story, the favorite part is the patch. And I'm thinking he's trying to quit smoking. This is what this guy must have a patch for. Turns out that's not it. He uttered a phrase I'm sure I will never hear again. I burned it on the tailpipe of my Ferrari, he says. And I'm thinking, I don't even know anyone has a Ferrari, much less burn their leg on a tailpipe. And sure enough, he has this huge burn on his leg, and that's what the bandage was for. So this is a case where we take this image and we need to clean it up a bit. We're kind of working with that a little bit, and that's sometimes what magazines do. Not everybody does, and this is another important lesson if you work for anything editorial. My editorial standards are not the same as Vanity Fair's, and Vanity Fair's isn't the same as the New York Times. The New York Times isn't the same as the New York Post. Everybody has kind of their own parameters, what they can do and not do. So we take the photo, we get rid of the patch, I get rid of the guy holding the table, and I get rid of the table there, and we put him on the cover, and you give the impression that he's walking on water, not realizing he's on a $400 plexiglass table, which I bought. This is going backwards to the Boston, remember the Boston Marathon cover? These are the same three police officers. If you remember, there was a woman and two men, the police officers. We recruited them to come back with David Ortiz right after. This is literally like 2 days after they had won the World Series. And we decide we're going to kind of like do a tribute to Boston in general. And their two heroes are David Ortiz, who wins the World Series, and then real, actual heroes, these policemen who are on our cover. And we decided to put them together. It takes a lot of maneuvering, 24 hours ahead of a photo shoot with three policemen, mostly because they have jobs and they can't just like take off tomorrow. David Ortiz can do whatever he wants, but the policeman's got to go to work. So I call this public affairs officer in Boston the night before. I'm on the phone with her like all night, texting, all night back and forth with this woman. And she finally agrees, yes, we can get them there and we can take them off work, no problem. The police commissioner showed up, the mayor showed up. All these people start coming to your photo shoot once they realize not their police officers, but David Ortiz is going to be there. It's a really big deal in Boston. So they're out here in the field, and this is Joe McNally, who's the photographer to shoot this for us. And when we got the okay to do this, I called Joe, who lives up in Connecticut. He's halfway to Boston anyway. So I call him up, and he's able to go the next morning and work this out. And we have some ideas, but again, we have a couple of options, and this one is the one we came up with. We turned them around the opposite from here. This is the wall in the outfield. So we turned them the opposite way, where their backs are to the home plate in the front of the field, and then we posed them with David Ortiz. This is another thing it's very subtle, but it's important on the editorial slant of this magazine. David Ortiz is standing over to the right, and I think the instincts are often to put whoever is the most recognizable right in the middle. And I thought about that for a while, and I talked to Joe McNally the night before, and I said to him, it just seems to me that the real heroes, and David Ortiz even said so, are these police officers. So as much as I don't want to remove Ortiz from the story, I don't want to make him the focus. I don't want to look like these policemen who really did an amazing thing that day as secondary figures. I want to make them the focus. And Ortiz was nice enough and understanding enough to stand off to the side. And it works better that way than Ortiz in the middle. But these are some of the things you have to kind of think if you're doing a photo shoot like this. And you probably should do both and then let people back in the office decide theoretically. This is one of my favorite text messages ever. We're doing a cover for the Sportsman of the Year, which is Peyton Manning of the Denver Broncos, Rod's opponent on Sunday. So if you see somebody on photographer do this when Peyton Manning runs by, you'll know it's Rod. And we decided we were going to pose Peyton Manning as our Sportsman of the Year. We presented him with the award Sportsman of the Year. Part of that comes usually with a portrait, except Tom Brady, who wouldn't pose. But everybody else poses for whatever reason. And he decides, I'm going to wear khakis and a polo shirt and an orange fleece. This is what they tell me at first. And I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work for us. I don't think, it just isn't special enough, That's like what you wear to go to the movies or something. And then he says, okay, how about if I wear, and he keeps escalating each day. I have these text messages back and forth with the PR guy and then a couple from Peyton who will send, his wife was sending me photos of outfits as she's laying them out for her husband, not child, her husband. So she's sending me the clothes, and each day it escalates into a nicer and nicer outfit. We have jeans and a sport coat and a shirt, but no tie. So each day it gets a little better. Then one day I get this from Peyton, and he sends me this text message and says, this is what my wife says I'm going to wear. It wasn't what I should wear, what I might wear. This is what my wife says I'm going to wear. I said, fair enough. You got to find the person who actually makes the decisions, and you move on. So this is what he sends me. We decide to do it this way. We are in Denver. We have about an hour with him. He's very generous with his time, gives us a whole hour. He wears the suit. You can't really see, but the photographer's laying down here. This is the Pocket Wizard, right? It's on for the flash there on his camera. You can see that. And we pose him here. We do a number of, like 3 different situations. And here is a second one. Again, this is Robert Beck, one of our staff photographers, laying on the ground here. It's very glamorous work, as you can see. And there's Peyton standing there with the studio. And then this becomes the opener for the story. The cover was a different image altogether, but this becomes the opener. And it's Peyton in the suit that his wife picked out, in the clothes that his wife picked out. And we take this, there's a little fill flash over here. We've got these backlit by the sun in the background. And if you know the Broncos, which is the name of this particular team, that's what the Bronco is back there. So it all kind of worked together for us. It also helps to have a cooperative athlete, which we did. And then that's the cover. We ended up switching and using something a little more traditional for a football picture, but the other picture was the opener. Social media, everywhere, as obviously I don't have to explain a whole lot about it, except that it does come in handy at times. It can work for you, it can work against you, as we all know. This is an incoming freshman at the University of Kansas, and he's like a phenom, Andrew Wiggins. He's like the best player from Canada than any of us can name for years and years. And he's really supposed to be like the best freshman in the country. And Kansas is one of these schools that is like incredibly gaga about their basketball team, like irrationally so. And this cover starts to kind of be talked about that we're going to put Andrew Wiggins on the cover. And the night before, I have a copy of this cover. It's on my, on my phone and on my computer. We release the covers usually we close the magazine Wednesday night, Monday night, and Wednesday around 11 o'clock in the morning is generally when we release our covers. So my own mistake, I decided to send this out Tuesday night, late Tuesday night. I tweet this photo out, partly because someone else in the Kansas world had gotten a copy of our cover somehow and already started to put it out there. So I tweet it, and then a Kansas basketball blog, which doesn't mean a whole lot to me personally, but it means a lot to people that live in Kansas, it explodes. I mean, they get so many hits, it shuts down the guy's entire blog, his computer system shuts down because it gets this overwhelming hit that this is the cover. I'm getting emails from the head of our PR office, get this off your, I said, somebody else has it, I didn't put it up there first, but it just explodes and it creates like this like cottage industry as people in Kansas are all excited because they haven't been on the cover since, right? Have they, Marguerite? I think this was the only one. And they may not be on the cover again for a year or two. You never know. I mean, you can't tell. This might be it for them for a while. And they're very excited and very passionate, and they believe in their team a lot. So this basically just took us into all new areas here. Same with this one, the University of Oregon, the same kind of thing, a very passionate school about their football program. And when we sent this out on a timely manner of 11 a.m. on Wednesday, and after I learned my lesson about the other one, then again, it explodes in that little pocket of Oregon fandom that there is. This is by one of our writers, Richard Deitch, has some ridiculous amount of Twitter followers, like 100,000 or something, a large, higher, like more people than we all know, of course. But too many people follow him. And he's very big in that world. And he asked this question, do you have a photograph of the greatest moment of your life? And obviously our relationship is athletics and sports. But a lot of people do the obvious thing. Sure, it's a marriage, it's the birth of a child, these are kind of things. But a lot of it was sports related. You know, you went to a baseball game with your dad or whatever, you know, or you know, you got a jersey from your favorite football player. You got run over by a bull, whatever your favorite moment is. And then we decided to turn this into like actually 2 pages in the magazine because I think the Huffington Post picked it up, if I'm not mistaken, and it exploded and it went all over the place and people were throwing in more photos than he could possibly do. So we picked up the pictures and we ran with it. You know, this stuff has a shelf life about as long as that sentence, but it's current enough for us and it catches a wave for a day or two there. Leading off is 3 pages. Actually, this isn't technically leading off, but leading off is 6 pages. Up in the front of the magazine. It's just supposed to be like the best pictures of the week. But we can use it for other things. We use it for photo essays if we have them, or some portrait series. We can use it for pretty much anything. It's in the editorial world, it's some prime real estate. It really is. And whenever we can do something in that leading off section a little different, rather than just 3 big action pictures, we try to do it, bless you, whenever possible. This was a great idea that somebody on the website had, I think. They were going to make some prints of Dr. J, who's this basketball player on the left, who's retired. And he was going to come in the office one day, and he's going to look at this table of prints and then tell a story about his favorite moments based upon these great photos. Plus, he's like maybe the most photogenic basketball player of all time. So you lay these pictures out, and then this is the type of thing where there's not really any text to go with this, not really words so much, it's just a lot of great photos. And then in great fashion, of course, over there as well. And he played in the 70s and mostly in the 70s, a little bit in the 80s. So this is like free stuff for us. We take these great photos we have an archive of. They're just sitting in a home somewhere. You bring them out periodically, you write a little story about it, and it's good use of our own material. And we don't have to actually have a story with this, just Dr. J stopping by the office and talking about his photographs. This photograph, this is the photographer that took the cover image. You can see him right here. This is the actual image. You can see the policeman taken off. Underneath there is the gentleman who fell down. And this particular image, as you can see, ran in our leading off, because this is what we did really quickly that day for the Boston Marathon. I'm going to just kind of motor through these really quickly, but this is all we did with the marathon. We're on the cover, a couple of pictures inside, and a small little essay. These are more photos from the marathon. You can tell, obviously, they kind of explain what happened. Athletes all kind of confused and dazed. They were stopped at one point from finishing the race, and if you're in that group, you have no idea what happened. I mean, you have maybe a little semblance, not really. This is a photographer, a friend of ours, friend of Bob's as well, a friend of ours, Bill Epridge, passes away, longtime contributor to Sports Illustrated, among other things. I don't know if anybody knows him, but Bill took the famous photographs of Bobby Kennedy dead in the hotel after being shot, and among other things. But he also shot a lot of sports for us. So when he passed away, we did this little section here, a tribute really of some of his great photographs. This was a collaboration with Time Magazine, where they did a story on these 2 chess champions who, if I don't read this, I couldn't tell you their names. But nonetheless, these 2 chess champions from different backgrounds training, I'm not sure what that means, for chess match, but this world championship, so they're training. And the younger guy here, who I think is from Norway or something, is actually, that's him on the bottom. He actually runs and lifts weights. I mean, he actually works out, plays volleyball, doesn't wear a shirt. And then this is just where the other guy's from in India. It just shows people in general playing chess and just shows kind of the atmosphere of it. This was a fellow that we did who had to lose weight, 17 pounds in 48 hours, to make weight for Ultimate Wrestling, Ultimate Fighting Championship. And so we followed him. Eric Thayer, a great photojournalist out of New York, spent 2.5 days with him. Everything except sleeping in the hotel. And so this is him losing the weight. You can see him sweating there in the elevator and so forth. And then it culminates. This is what you look like after you've lost all that weight. And then you can eat after you've been weighed and everything's good. And that's what you look like after you eat a lot, after you've lost all that weight, which still looks pretty good to me, but it doesn't look anything like that. That's literally like 12 hours later on the right. And then he fights somebody and gets poked in the eye and he loses. So, but that makes it a better story in a way. So then this is a race car driver, Jimmy Johnson, the world champion, blah, blah, blah. And we get some access to him through his team. They allow us to come in and spend like a weekend with him down in Florida. He wins the race, magically, because we're there, I'm sure. We get all these great photos. We get behind the scenes, doing all the stuff in the trailer that he travels in. Same thing here. Neil Leifer, one of the great sports photographers ever, took this famous photo of Muhammad Ali. Is inducted, he's the first photographer that we know of, inducted into a Sports Hall of Fame as a photographer. And this was just kind of a tribute to that as we announced that. This is really quickly, this is my creative director's door. This has nothing to do with anything other than, I think it's funny, because he covers his door with paper, and it's not because he doesn't like people or he works naked. It's because he is working on the swimsuit issue, which is at Sports Illustrated. It's like I guess like the Pentagon or something. It's a secret. Who's on the cover? What's the cover going to look like? And they don't want it leaking, so they like throw it out there. And then on his wall, he's got all the layouts for the inside there on the wall, ready to work. I'm showing you this. There's only 2 pictures left, and then I'll finish up really quickly. This was one of the highlights of my life, which was orchestrated, among other people, by Bob McNeely when I worked at the White House, and the president did a photo album that Bob and the other photographers took that you present to President Mandela as he's leaving the Washington, D.C. And you remember, I go over to the Blair House where he's staying with his daughter, and I get to present this gift on behalf of the President of the United States. This big, beautiful, leather-bound photo album. Hillary and Clinton both sign it and everything else. And I get to like meet him. As you can tell, I'm so enamored with him that I'm not even looking at him. But I am telling you, it's one of those, what the moments, because you're sitting there thinking, how did I get here? I mean, I think Andrew Young was in that receiving line, and people like that, people with absolute stature, and then me, sitting here giving him this gift. And he says to me, so sorry to see you go. I don't really know what that means, but it's words I'll never, ever forget. So I got to do this by working with Bob and working through, this is what my job lets me do, which is why I tell you I have the best job in the world. And then I thought this was a great moment, and then you fast forward like 20 years, and this is my 16-year-old who is at a Knicks game, and because I know somebody and because I get this and that, and I'm very fortunate to be here and all these things, I get to get her down on the court before the game, and I get to have a picture taken with my daughter, which is just like, I'm thinking, she'll have this picture forever, and it just makes me incredibly grateful. Just as this did 20-something years ago, made me incredibly fortunate and grateful I was working where I was working. This does the same type of thing where I'm incredibly lucky to be able to bring my daughter to events that I get to cover. So anyway, that's what I do. This is Sports Illustrated, and I appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
When you're actually on site,
Yeah.
then, what your day looks like in terms of what you're actually doing
Yeah.
when everyone else is out shooting.
Well, something like, let's just say the Super Bowl, which is a large example, but we'll use that as an example, which is this Sunday. Game kickoff time is 6:30. I'll probably get to the stadium around noon, and I'll get there early. I have 9 photographers, and we'll go over everything from like where they're going to stand, because at a Super Bowl, if you're in this corner, you're in this corner. You can't move. You can't run up and down. You got to like stay in your little quadrant. And I'll talk to them about that kind of stuff, the things that we're looking for. I also go over what I think is going to happen during the game. It's going to hinge on this or that, going in kind of stuff. Messengers, how they're going to get the cards to me to be able to edit. I have to look at all the cards. Well, I have a lot of editors at a game like that working with me. But how they're going to get the cards, mostly logistical stuff and things like that. I work with guys and women who've done this enough that I don't have to go over a lot of details, but it's a lot of logistics. You have to make sure it runs on time and runs smoothly, because one little thing gets out of whack. One guy forgets to send his card, and it disrupts the whole thing, because we have to kind of keep up. You ever worked in a restaurant in the kitchen by any chance? Have you ever done dishes, which I did in a Chinese restaurant when I was in high school? And if you get behind, you're screwed for the rest of the night, because you'll never catch up. And editing is very much like washing dishes in a Chinese restaurant. And you're sitting there and you're just trying to keep up with the flow of stuff. So that's the majority of it. Then when the game starts, as things start to develop and I see the game going this way or that way, I send them notes. And I said, make sure you get this guy. Because when you're on the field, you kind of have an idea what's going on, but you can get kind of, especially football, far more than baseball is, because baseball slows and it goes and it slows, and you have moments to kind of look up and you can kind of realize, oh, that guy's given up one hit over the course of the game. But a football game, you could go easily into the third quarter, not realize somebody's not thrown an incomplete pass all day, because to you it's just like this crazy action. And that kind of stuff has to come from me to be able to kind of give it to them. So that's pretty much it. It's mostly logistical stuff, and as the game kind of progresses. And if something, I also look at pictures. Oh, you're clearly off. There's something wrong with your camera. That mostly that kind of stuff. But I get there really, really early for a game like that. So the majority of the time, though, the photographers edit and transmit their own from the field on their own. But when we go to these games, we get there early to help them out as much as possible. Any other questions? Yeah.
Actually, I have a quick one as you go by. At Eddie Adams this year, you had the guy from SI that did that wonderful presentation, had a lot of
Robert Beck.
Robert Beck.
He's the guy who shot Peyton Manning.
I was amazed how much he'd done with remotes.
Yeah,
Have you
yeah.
found like remotes each year now with digital photography because of the huge cards that you do more and more and more with
Yeah.
remotes?
I think the only thing that slows down the remotes is the league letting you hang up the remotes. You get limitations on where you can put them. But I think the photographers, most of them, would be happy to hang them like Christmas lights all over the place.
Do you think there's more of them each year? I mean, you're just doing more and more.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So in certain sports, especially basketball, probably above everything else, because it's an indoor setting, which is where you hang remotes. It's got a lot of places to hang, a lot of angles that look really good. But yeah, we like remotes. It gives us, you have one photographer who acts as 5 photographers, because he has 4 cameras over here. So he kind of orchestrates the whole thing together. So yeah, more and more unusual. We're now using like the robotics with the swivel head that we can place up in the rafters at the Olympics, and it rotates around 360 degrees. If you wanted, remotes before they were set right here, and if anything came within the path, you got a photo. But like, a bear trap, if it didn't step on the trap, you don't get anything. And that's how the remotes were. But now we can rotate them through a handheld, like a little stick, back in the office. You can do it from the office, and you can rotate around as you see action kind of move around an arena.
And the one of his I loved was that one of the home run, where you could see the ball
Yes.
in the air.
Yeah.
Up there. It was amazing. I mean,
Exactly.
you never see
Yeah, and you have to have really great instincts and reflexes on when to push the button. Because if you're like me, you're like, you're watching the ball go by and you forget to push the remotes. But
On the photographer you sent out to the coast to get those shots of Jason, I guess his name, the basketball,
Jason
the
Collins,
gay,
right.
the gay basketball.
right, well,
player.
he lived there. I didn't send him, but he lived in L.A. Right.
You assume that if you told him anything about him, that if he was a gay he would have been compromised totally. I'm not sure.
No,
I
I'll
understand.
tell you why I didn't tell him.
Yeah, I'd be very interested.
We had a 24-hour window to do this photo shoot.
Oh, so you didn't want to get it out.
And a man who's going to come out with that kind of information, it comes out to a matter of the less people that know, the better. Because if he changed his mind, which he had every right to do, and at 1 in the afternoon when I'm finding this out, at 8 o'clock that night, if he doesn't want to do it anymore, the less people that know, that's the better. So when the guy's actually walking in the door, I never told him that he was coming out as a gay athlete. I just told him the guy's name literally as he was in the car that day to go photograph him. But I didn't tell him the gay part until the magazine came out. That's when he knew. But I didn't want to tell him any earlier because if Jason Collins changed his mind, I didn't want other people to know. Because the more people to know, then it's, the obviously ramifications come up.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi,
Hi.
I was wondering if you guys reach out to
athletes to their agents to try and find out if they'd like to be on the cover, or if the athletes' agents are more likely to reach out to you to see if you'll put their
Oh.
represented person on your cover?
Yeah, that's a good question. And occasionally it works, it does work the other way once in a while where the athlete's agent reaches out to us, but not too often. There's somewhat of a pretentiousness about that where it's a big assumption that we would want them on the cover. Now, obviously, Jason Collins reached out to us to tell the story, not necessarily the cover, but more often than not, we reach out to them. I think that most publications like to at least have the illusion that it's their idea to do a story. So I think they like to initiate it a lot, and I think that's what gravitates that way, because there's always some motive. If an agent reaches out to you to do a story on their client, there's some kind of motive going on, which I think just journalistically you're somewhat suspicious of. But primarily we reach out to them. The difference is that if it's in season, it's like right now during football season, if I need to reach an athlete, I have to go through the team. That's kind of how the rules work. It's an unwritten kind of thing, but that's primarily how it works. If I wanted to do somebody on Rod's team for the Seahawks, I would call Rod or the PR guy and go through the team. If I want to do somebody on the Yankees, I wouldn't call the Yankees right now, I'd call the agent, because they're not playing. The Yankees aren't part of him right now. He's like, he's in Miami at home or whatever. I would probably go through the agent. You can do both if you have a relationship, but it kind of depends on how the season goes. So, yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? Yeah? Oh, sorry.
With the high def video cams and everything, do you ever snatch stills from theirs and rather than the photographer itself?
It's going to head in that direction more and more. The problem is very simple. The problem is that anything that moves into the area of video is owned by somebody else. NBC, CBS, Fox, whoever, ESPN, whatever, they pay millions, if not billions of dollars to have exclusive video. And even though I know I'm going to turn it into a still, they still look at it as a video. So some guy sitting there videotaping something, even though I'm going to get a still out of it, if a league saw that or somebody saw that, they'd be taken right out of the park. So that's where, but we're heading in that direction, because like the red cameras and those type of things, it's heading that way, and we're going to have to figure out a way to kind of balance that. But it's difficult, I think, if for no other reason than just kind of organically, it's hard for the leagues to kind of give that over, because they still look at it as video. Even though you and I know, no, I'm going to take a still from it. I think they're not trusting of that just yet. So we don't do it a lot now, and it's hard because of that connection with the leagues that pay so much, or the networks that pay so much money. Yeah.
When your photojournalists are covering a story such as the Olympics,
Yeah.
Disregarding your cover art because you're going to retouch the images, and
Usually.
and the swimsuit stuff.
Often.
because
Well, swimsuit is another animal altogether, but yeah.
But the photojournalists that are covering the images that they capture, what is your policy on retouching any of those images upon publication?
The general rule of thumb is a little sharpening, just in-camera sharpening or Photoshop sharpening, not overly so. You can see it if you do it too much, so it doesn't do you any good to do so. You enhance the color more than anything else. We send raw images in, not JPEGs. And when we get the raw image in, as all of you have seen a raw image, it's quite often very flat. It doesn't have a lot of the color tones in it yet. So we enhance the color a little bit more than anything else. That's primarily what we do. If we fall into an area where we need to do something more drastic, like add sky to sky because the photo's too truncated or something like that, then that's a discussion that really has to go with a lot of people, and you have to figure out what the photo's representing. I'll give you an example that if we were to use this photo, which is just two knuckleheads at a basketball game, we could probably add 4 inches to the floor if we needed to make it work. Right? Because it's a fairly harmless, kind of nothing photo in that way. Boston Globe photo, we did nothing to that photo. We would never do anything to that photo. It's you have to kind of weigh it with the image you have. I think we owed it to history and to photojournalists in general not to screw around with that photo, and we did nothing with it. So you have to kind of weigh it piecemeal as to what the picture is. But We're not against bumping up the color a little bit, for instance. That's probably the biggest thing we do each time, is just kind of enhance. I don't change it. I don't change it from a blue uniform to a yellow uniform, but we do kind of just saturate a little bit to pump it up, because that helps the cover a little bit. Anything else? Hi. Here's, I mean.
You were talking about standards between all the magazines, and even though they're not all oriented towards sports,
Right.
like what do you think are the traits that distinguish your magazine, how you tell a story, besides just the sport matter, compared to other magazines when they do storylines on the celebrities?
Right. If
Like
I'm
what-
talking about sports photos, then we really don't alter sports photos, because it's a moment in time. You can't really do a lot with it, or it's obvious you did something to it and you've breached some kind of ethics, you know? You can't really do a lot with the basketball picture of the actual action. We need to kind of keep it within what actually happened. And if some guy's head in the background is distracting, and some guy's head is in the background distracting, and we just leave it that way because we're capturing some kind of moment. If we're going to enhance a photo to some degree, it's going to be something that was controlled by the photographer, like a portrait or something like that. I think that if you go to the New York Times, they do virtually nothing to their photos. The way it is the way it is. They basically just do some basic kind of things like I mentioned. They may bump up the color just to some degree to make it be able to read on newspaper print. And they may sharpen just the slightest bit, but really virtually nothing. But other people will alter them a great deal. And it's a big difference between celebrities, because you are, with athletics to some degree too, but celebrities, you're just kind of putting out there an image of something, you know, maybe not even who they really are. You're just kind of throwing out this kind of fantasy of who somebody is and this image of what you want them to be. So if you're altering those photographs to some degree just to make somebody look like they don't have wrinkles or whatever the case may be, then that kind of comes with the territory on that. We wouldn't do that with sports photos, but we might, you know, to some degree kind of alter the color, bump up the color and sharpen stuff for a portrait and stuff like that. Yeah. Anything else? I guess that's it.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Brad.
you're welcome. Thank
Wonderful
you.
lecture.